Hi, this is Elsa, and I have with me today Tim Burton. The topic, lawfare, or show trials. Take the name you want. What it's about is that if you deal with Islam, if you speak out about Islam in some kind of way, you risk lawfare. You risk being put on trial for what you have said. You may know you're doing something risky. You may do something in a fit of anger, like somebody who threw a pork sandwich at a mosque. You may do something that is almost certain to get you a response, like publishing an image of Muhammad these days. And I want to talk to Tim because he twice has had the legal system on him. And I want to know if the first time he had any inkling it would happen. And then the second time, how did that happen? I also have him on because right now he's appealing because he went to prison the second time. And he's appealing because right now what we have is a precedent that for using the word taqiyya in relationship to somebody who has been convicted of fraudulently claiming that there were more cases of Islamophobia than there were, in other words, making Islam seem really victimized. He's used it in relationship to that person, and he has been convicted of, I believe I have the words right, religiously aggravated hate crime. Is that it?
Yeah, it's religiously aggravated harassment, Elsa, and I was quite surprised, as you say, when I first came to the attention of the authorities.
That's the first time.
I was doing.
That's the first time, not the second. Okay, can I just want to backtrack a little on you to start you off. What's been your attitude to the law during your life as a boy? How did you feel about cops or whatever you call them, coppers or bobbies? What was your family like around the law?
Yeah, we were all pretty much law-abiding. I was brought up to believe that the system of law that we have, especially in the United Kingdom, was very fair. And the reason really to adjust my feelings towards the law until relatively recently, when I had my own personal experiences. But prior to that, yeah, I was very much in favour of the law, because I saw it as a fair system and certainly much, much better than in many other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. So you were not wary. The first time when you got charged and you had used the word taqiyya artist in relationship to somebody who had been convicted of dishonesty, you had had funds taken away from his organization for falsehoods, false claims, etc. In other words, it seemed really appropriate. Were you expecting any charges?
I certainly wasn't. Yeah, this all came about back in 2014. A gentleman by the name of Fiaz Magal, who runs an organisation called Tell Mama, was exposed in the national press as having fraudulently misrepresented the figures of his organisation in order to get large amounts of taxpayers' money. Now, I commented on this, and I was admittedly quite rude about Mr. Magal, but I certainly didn't think that I had crossed the line in terms of legality. So I was really quite surprised to find the best of the West Midlands boys in blue on my doorstep one December morning.
And that first time, so the first time you used the term, you had no thought, oh, I'm going to get hit by it, because in fact, when somebody's been convicted of something, people do speak loudly, especially defrauding the public, taking taxpayer money and all that. You might expect that people can, one would expect that quite harsh terms would be in order. Was it only the taqiyya word that got you into trouble, or was it other of the harsh words?
Well, it was primarily my use of the word taqiyya, I called him in print on Twitter a mendacious, grievance-mongering taqiyya artist. And he took that very personally. He was offended and upset and hurt and insulted, at least to listen to how he was telling it. And he went running to his friends in the West Midlands, in the Metropolitan Police, to complain. And the Metropolitan Police, instead of sending him away and telling him not to be so stupid and to just get on with his life and get over it, said, well, certainly, sir, you're a very important, well-connected Muslim, and then, therefore, when you say jump, sir, we ask how high. And the Metropolitan Police spoke to my local police force, who sent a couple of boys round to pick me up and interrogate me. And I was arrested, charged and prosecuted for using the word taqiyya in that context. And that the trial revolved around the use of the word taqiyya.
And yet the word taqiyya is something that in counter-jihad circles, everyone knows it. Everyone knows that this is part of Islamic doctrine, or not formal Islamic doctrine, but that it's used all over. Everyone knows that very often prominent Islamics will say one thing to the West and quite a different thing to an Islamic audience, and the word that's connected with that is taqiyya. So this is a widely known word, and yet you got charged with it. That time, what was the trial like? How expensive was the trial too? Because very often these things cost. They don't. Did it, by the way, cost the Tell Mama person or only you?
No, it only cost me money. The thing about somebody like Fiaz Magal, he can make use of his connections with the police forces and with the legal system to get them to do things that nobody else could. He sits on a panel that advises the Crown Prosecution Service over here. His organisation advises police forces, and so if he picks up the phone and says, I want something done about Mr. Burton, there's no cost to him. The legal system will evaluate a complaint, and if they
how much did it cost you?
Has merit, then they will pursue it.
How much did it cost you?
Tens of thousands of pounds.
Tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands of pounds. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God. So yes. Very expensive. So that's a lot of holidays or mortgage payments or thinking of your elder years when you might need some resources, all of those things.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have to say, back in 2014, there were a lot of people out there who heard about what was happening, and they did support me to a certain extent, but I was still left a great deal out of pocket because it's such an expensive business. If you have to defend yourself against an accuser in court, there is an enormous cost. I mean, I was helped by the fact that my primary witness, defence witness, Professor Hans, services to me free of charge, and it was largely because of Professor Hans Janssen that I was acquitted back in 2014, and consequently I walked away from the trial in 2014 a free man with my good name still intact, and but it still cost me a lot of money, and I thought not much about Fiaz Magal after that time. I thought I'll chalk that one up to experience, and I'd more or less forgotten about him until.
I want to fast forward. I'm going to fast forward
Yes.
because you did not continue to forget about him. If this were a sitcom, we would have episode 2, Laurel and Hardy, or whatever it is, Laurel and Hardy taking on the big bad monster again. And Laurel and Hardy are not prone to learn. All right. What was the word that you used that got you in trouble the second time?
Well, the second time was...
Now, what was the word?
When
the word.
Somebody,
they picked one word again.
Well, they did. They picked the word taqiyya again. Mm-hmm. And Fiaz Magal said, you know, this word is very, very insulting. If you use it to a Muslim, it has connotations of racism. It doesn't, as we know. and it's very offensive, and it's insulting, and it's hurtful, and it goes to my heart. He said, it goes to my heart as an affront to my Muslim identity. You should have heard him in court. It was awful, and to hear him speak, you would think that he was a real shrinking violet, as we say over here. But taqiyya again was the main word that the Crown Prosecution Service were referring to when I was brought to trial yet again in 2017.
Okay, you called him. People who don't know about this, you should tell the story in brief. Like, how did a delightful Tell Mama person, or not so delightful, how did he happen to cross your path again? And why did you call him a taqiyya artist again?
Well, in 2016, somebody drew my attention to an advertisement where Tell Mama was recruiting for an extra caseworker. And my first reaction was one of annoyance. I thought Tell Mama have been doing quite enough damage as it is, because they present Muslims as victims. And of course, there's all this business about fraudulently manipulating the system in order to get taxpayers' money. And I thought the last thing they need is another caseworker to increase the problems, because the bigger that organisation gets, the more difficult it becomes for people on the right of the political spectrum to express the truth. So there was this advertisement, and the second thought that crossed my mind, and this is possibly where I got into a little bit of trouble, was I thought I could do that job, and I applied to Tell Mama for the position of caseworker, stating all my wonderful relevant attributes, how I'd worked in the Middle East for many years when I was younger, how my people skills would be an asset to the organisation. And I went on in this vein. And then at the end of it, I said, on second thoughts, people who know me consider me to be quite honest and trustworthy, and I probably wouldn't fit in to an organisation run by a mendacious, grievance-mongering taqiyya artist. And for some reason, that seemed to upset them.
Okay, so it upset them. I know there was a bit more of an exchange. Now, the second time, everything in the trial went against you. Like if you said the Tell Mama guy had everything, my heart was stabbed, I was bleeding to death emotionally from this dreadful word. You, on the other hand, had a change of barrister, I believe your word is, barrister, towards the last moment, and as opposed to representing you, she represented the other side, it seemed.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's not too far from the truth, because when I was preparing for the trial, my original barrister, which is like a senior lawyer over here, he took a look at the evidence and he said, Mr. Burton, I don't see how they can possibly convict you on the evidence that we have here. And I thought, well, that's great. We'll go to trial. We'll make sure that the truth is heard, and hope we'll get acquitted this time as well as last time in the same way. But unfortunately, a week or so before the trial, in whom I had confidence, he had to go and do something else. And another barrister was arranged for me, who I was told was just as competent, just as good in all respects. And so we went with that barrister, but that was a huge mistake, because that barrister was not in my corner at all. She didn't understand the implications of the case. She hadn't done her homework. She missed loads of opportunities during the trial to put Fiaz Magal on the spot and to promote my cause. And the end result was that the prosecution counsel were very competent, and they sold the story to the jury that I was a bigoted, right-wing, racist, Islamophobic extremist. Obviously, I should never see the light of the book. And I was found guilty, and as you say, I served a term of imprisonment because of the use of my words in an email to a mendacious, grievance-mongering taqiyya artist.
Which you're using again. Are you afraid if I put this online that you will have a third lawsuit on your hands?
No, I'm not. I'm not at all worried. I mean, the problem that I had this time was that I had actually sent an email directly to Fiaz Magal's organisation, and the prosecuting counsel said, well, that's the same as sending it to Fiaz Magal. And I said, well, no, it isn't. But he pushed the issue, and the jury obviously chose to believe the prosecuting counsel. My view was that if you send an email to an organisation, you've got no clue as to whether anybody in the organisation is any specific person. And then what business have they got being offended or insulted? They have no business to be offended because the email's addressed to the organisation, not to a person. Unfortunately, that argument was thrown out during the court to the extent that the jury decided that it wasn't relevant. But I felt that a proper defence barrister would have picked up on this point and pushed it really hard and got Fiaz Magal to admit that even if he did find it offensive, it wasn't addressed to him personally, and even if it wasn't addressed to him personally, if he didn't want the email sent, he had a block button in his email software and he could have blocked it. There was absolutely no reason for him to feel offended and insulted. But again, this was something that my defence barrister didn't push forward, unbelievably didn't push forward.
And so now I'm going to go to why we're here today. A horrible precedent has been set that sending an email to an organisation about somebody convicted of mendaciousness and using the word taqiyya in reference to that person, though it's not even addressed to that person. Now you're addressing it to me. So presumably if he listens to this all this way through and gets offended, it's like on his own petard. He cannot therefore say, I came across this video and accidentally and oh my God, I was devastated. He can't do that, I gather. But anyway, you've been convicted, sent to prison, and what's the message about other people who use a term about somebody who's already been convicted of major defrauding of the government on behalf of his victim mongering? What's the precedent?
Well,
now you're appealing.
I mean, I felt I had to, and I'm of the opinion that if we were to rerun the trial process, I would most certainly win, because I understand now the underhand tactics that are employed during a Crown Court trial that I didn't appreciate at the time of the initial trial. There was an awful lot going on, and I put my trust into this defence barrister, which, as it turned out, was the worst thing that I could have done. But on a rerun of the trial, I'm quite sure that I could advance the arguments that the prosecuting counsel were trying to wave away, and I could make a much better case of these arguments myself than the defence barrister did last time. And of course, when you're talking about the money defrauded from the government by Fiaz Magal, this is hundreds of thousands of pounds, $500,000 at least, if not more.
That's in 1 year, right?
I felt that it was quite... this was in 1 year. He was getting no punishment for this whatsoever.
In fact,
so I felt
his money
that
reinstated, I believe.
He had his money. He had his money reinstated, and he was carrying on much as before, and he was advertising for a new caseworker. And I just thought this was completely wrong. And so after I sent my initial email applying for this job, a bit tongue-in-cheek, as we say.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Well, that initial email was more or less, as I saw it, telling him, I see you. I see you've gotten your money back. Yeah. And I see you're just the kind of person that you have always been. And, I mean, I just got that you're answering as in you're not invisible. I see you. You're not, maybe you got your money back, but I see you, and you're still, as you use the term, taqiyya artist.
But this second trial, the prosecution introduced a Muslim witness who swore blind that taqiyya was never used by Muslims today. It was only ever used 1,000 years ago by Shia Muslims to protect themselves, and therefore my use of the term taqiyya was highly offensive. Now, of course, this is a Muslim, so when he talks about taqiyya, he's actually using taqiyya to talk about taqiyya. And I had a defence witness, another defence witness lined up, who was going to counter what he said. But my defence barrister said to me, "You're defending this because it'll confuse the jury." Now, I was a little bit taken aback by this, as you might imagine, but this is a barrister of 20 years' experience. And in a Crown Court trial, you know, who am I going to trust? Am I going to trust my own inexperience, or am I going to leave it to a very highly paid, experienced barrister to fight my case for me? And so I chose to leave it to that highly paid, experienced barrister, and that was the biggest mistake that I made, because she wasn't in my corner. She was completely incompetent. She missed so many chances to haul the prosecution witness over the coals. And not only that, but we found after the trial that there was a very important piece of information that hadn't been disclosed at the trial, which in itself should render the trial null and void. And that's why we want to through.
And that particular piece is that there was a blatant, utterly blatant conflict of interest.
Yes, there certainly was. I mean, there were several aspects of the conflict of interest. One was the conflict of interest that Fiaz Magal had. He sits on a panel advising the Crown Prosecution Service and telling them what decisions they ought to make as to whether or not to prosecute people like me. So there's a huge conflict of interest there. But more importantly, the Crown Prosecution Service witness, before the trial, he had to submit a document to the judge, to the court, saying there is nothing that could manifest itself as a conflict of interest when I give my evidence. So that every prosecution witness has to do this. But what we found afterwards was that the Crown Prosecution witness had a separate company. He found was paying him a lot of money, $100,000, $200,000 a year, and a patron of this organisation was in fact a senior member of the Crown Prosecution Service. So there you have a supposedly independent witness giving evidence against me. The charge was brought by the Crown Prosecution Service. He's giving evidence against me, and yet he's receiving material and moral support from a senior member of the Crown Prosecution Service. That's a huge conflict of interest, and one which in any other circumstance, if it was anybody else, that would result in a contempt of court application, and automatically the conviction would be overturned. Now, the problem is, of course, that these people are very highly placed in the establishment, as we call it over here, the political elite, and the senior judges and the high-up members of the Crown Prosecution Service. They all have lunch together and they all pat each other's backs, and consequently I'm having difficulty pushing through the contempt of court application, which means that not only have I had to incur a lot of money for the trial itself, but I'm having to incur a lot of extra cost just to get justice done regarding the conflict of interest that's leading to contempt of court.
And for the rest of us who have not been hit with that charge, the problem is that now this precedent has been set that taqiyya is not used by present-day Islamics. To use that word is a gross slur against an Islamic, and that you can get a jail sentence for this word, even against somebody who has been convicted of defrauding the public in relationship
this is
all of this, so that if we get charged with anything, that's the precedent. So it's not just you. So on the one hand, everyone else is entering a more dangerous situation. On the other hand, if you manage to topple this, because this has been going on, even if this had not happened to you, all these connections, this person, by the way, I know the answer. Is this the absolutely first time he has spoken in public in any way that could be construed as a conflict of interest?
Well, he's a highly placed person who advises the Crown Prosecution Service, so it's quite inappropriate for him to press them to bring charges, complaining that he's a victim of some sort. Now, to the best of my knowledge and belief, before this court took place and before the one in 2014 took place, he had a track record of throwing his weight around and bullying people who he saw as criticising Islam in various ways. There were various organisations where he threatened them with civil prosecution, but of course civil prosecution costs the person bringing the complaint a lot of money, and so I'm sure he was very pleased to find that he could get the Metropolitan Police and the West Midlands Police and the criminal justice system to do his dirty work for him, because it didn't cost him a penny.
And then with the next person, the one who, the taqiyya artist specialist, the specialist, I believe he has testified at other trials. And therefore, to get him thrown out and to expose that, you're exposing something even larger.
Has been a witness in some very high-profile trials involving people who were at Guantanamo Bay, for example. And if he has given expert witness evidence, which is in contempt of court because he hasn't disclosed his conflict of interest, then of course all these people are going to have their convictions quashed as well. So it has the potential for being extremely embarrassing for the criminal justice system, which is why, of course, they're not very keen on taking my complaint forward, and I'm being stonewalled at every level. Now, it's not the end of the road, because if they continue to stonewall, we can take this, and we will be taking this, to the Court of Appeal, and from there, ultimately, to the Court of Human Rights, because that is our right as British citizens to be able to do that. So it's a nuisance at the moment, but of course what they do is they keep trying to stall you and to weigh you down and hope that you run out of money before they have to do anything about it. And every now and again I have to keep my barrister on side and say, look, I know this is a lot of work for you to be chasing this up on my behalf, but you know, and of course my new barrister, he has to be paid at least a little bit just to keep him sweet. But yes, it's an expensive business. I mean, the trial was expensive, the appeal process is expensive, and even if the conviction is overturned, I'm in no way certain that I'll be able to claim any kind of damages, because the legal system is such that they can make it really difficult for you if they want to, and until you just get totally fed up or you've used up all your money. So it's an extremely difficult process, but it's a fight that we have to fight, because, as you say, it's a very bad precedent.
Yeah, and I am therefore asking everyone who can, could you please help with this appeal? You will see on screen where you can send money. You'll have a choice of currencies, because it'll be PayPal. You can pay in any currency you like, and it'll just get converted as you do it. But the really important thing is we need to win this fight, country after country, etc. And so much is hanging on this one, because if you take down this expert witness, you're tying it to all kinds of problems with the Crown prosecution, conflict of interest, etc. So it's like a domino effect. You know, it was just like one person. You could say, well, they just chose badly. Well, they weren't allowed to say taqiyya artist. How come they can have a conflict of interest and that's not relevant?
Yes, well, it's extremely relevant.
Yeah, it's so obviously relevant, and it ties to so many other cases. In other words, they've used somebody And by the way, either all the Islamic experts that I have read don't know anything about Islam, or the word taqiyya is used within Islam. And much more than that, the concept of lying on behalf of Islam is something that is from within Islam. I mean, I've read this hundreds of times, and either they're all in a group delusion, or else this is the truth. And in other words, that expert witness is lying, either that or seriously misinformed, and there he is, a Muslim claiming to be an expert, and all the experts I know say something very different. Would you answer that?
Well, yeah, I mean, taqiyya is a doctrine that is built into Islam, and it allows Muslims to lie in order to give non-Muslims a good impression of Islam. And it's not just permission to lie. If a Muslim cannot achieve the same goal of making Islam look good in the eyes of non-Muslims, if he can't do that by telling the truth, he is actually under an obligation to lie. He actually has to lie. So he can do this with a clear conscience. I mean, in our culture, Judeo-Christian culture, people do lie, obviously, but they do so knowing that it's a bad thing. Now, you don't have that in Islam. Muslims can lie to non-Muslims and are encouraged to do so. So the implication is you cannot trust a single thing any Muslim has to say on the subject of Islam. That is a fact. And when Muslims say that's not true, effectively they are just using taqiyya to lie about taqiyya. It's Islamic doctrine. You can see reference to it in Quran chapter 3 verse 28, in Quran chapter 16 verse 106. I could go on, okay, but it's doctrine that is in there plain as day, and there is no excuse for people not to know this. And it's part of my job to bring this out and to make sure people do know it. But of course, sometimes when you do bring these things out, it comes with a certain price. And I've had myself caught and trying to fund this appeal, and I've also had to serve a term of imprisonment. Well, I got out alive, which I suppose is one thing, but I should never have had to serve that term of imprisonment if justice had been done in the first place. So we've got to take it as far as we can, not just for me, but for everybody else in the future who might be affected by the advancement of Islam and the oppression of our free speech.
Yeah, anyone. And by the way, this is happening, as you and I know, and as almost everyone counter-jihad knows, in one country after another in the West. There's ever more threats to freedom of speech. In Canada, where I am right now, we've got something called M103, which of course is supposed to be nothing at all. And everybody who is at all alert goes, nothing at all? My God, it's a step in that direction. And you're several steps ahead in that direction. I'm seeing the sign, truth is not hate speech. Knowing Islamic doctrine is not harassment, etc. So I really want to wish you all the best, and we're going to stay with this case and keep everybody posted. And we're also going to hope that you get a little bit of your coffers filled, so that people can do their bit. Like, if we haven't been hit with the case, as long as we are not taping our mouths shut totally, we're running risks that we offend somebody. And even if not, I think we just need a society where freedom of speech is guaranteed. It's something that we can be sure.
Well, yes. Yeah, we do need that, because if you take away freedom of speech, then there is absolutely no defence against the advancement of Islam in peaceful terms. I mean, obviously, if it goes too far, if we are pushed too far, what will happen is we'll end up with civil conflict. And when I'm talking about civil conflict, I'm not just talking about people insulting each other in the street. I'm talking about it's like we saw in the 1990s, like we saw in Lebanon in the 1970s, like we've seen throughout history, where Muslims have pushed and pushed and pushed, and eventually the indigenous populations have had no choice but to defend themselves. And sometimes, if you go back through the history of jihad over 1400 years, you will see that there are instances of people who have left it too late, because the message from Islam is, oh, this is a religion of peace, therefore there's nothing to worry about. And they keep pushing that message until there are so many of them that when the indigenous population wakes up, it's too late. Now, I don't want that to happen in my country or in your country, Elsa, or in the United States or anywhere in Europe, but that is the way that our political elites are leading us. So I certainly feel to speak up and tell people about the truth concerning Islam, and no matter what it costs me. So that's where it's got me. But I'm bloody but unbowed, as I think the phrase goes, and I shall carry on fighting as long as I've got breath in my body.
And we all need to do this everywhere, because, by the way, what you're also saying is if you win, we have a slightly better chance of no bloodshed. Because if we can win through the legal system, if we can win with that kind of pushback, then you don't need to go on to violence. Like, people have criticized Tommy Robinson for being rowdy when he was starting to speak out against grooming gangs, I believe it's called. Gee, how terrible. I mean, you know, in one town there were 1,400 girls, indigenous girls, groomed into prostitution. Well, isn't that worth being rowdy about? And more. And I'm just saying, what we want is a peaceful solution, and for that you need the law on your side, and we need people like you who are fighting. Congratulations.
Well, thank you, Elsa. But yeah, you're quite right. There are terrible things that Muslims are doing every day in the name of Islam around the world and in my country. And if we're going to stand any chance at all of stopping it, then we have to have the law on our side, because these people will not stop of their own accord. It's worked for them for...
Why should they?
It's worked for
if
them
the
for
law
200 years.
is on their side, why shouldn't they use the law? If I want whatever I want, if I want that refrigerator in the store and mine is on the blink, and I can just take it and I'm not charged, why shouldn't I be able to just take the refrigerator? I mean, I'm going to find out what's the limit. So I'm all like, tell Mama, my God, well, he's just, that's what he wants. He wants lots of public money, etc. Well, it's for the law to go, hey, you defrauded the public, you don't get any more. So that's whom I see as at fault. Then when he goes to complain about you, it's for the law. It's for the police officers, but they're either too afraid or bought or afraid for their own jobs, etc., etc. So I'm not, like, the Tell Mama guy doesn't seem like a particularly nice individual, but it's all these people around who are letting it happen, and that's what you're fighting, much more than...
Oh, yeah. Well, it's very true that people over here in positions of authority who ought to be doing their job and upholding the law, they're afraid of being called racist and Islamophobic, and they're letting anything to do with Muslims go unpunished, and anybody who criticises what Muslims do in the name of Islam, they get the full force of the law coming down on them. I can speak to this from personal experience, because I was assaulted in the street by a gang of Muslims a couple of years ago. The police tracked them down, found out who they were. They had stolen my campaign materials for my parliamentary election campaign, because I stood for as a member of parliament. They stole my materials and assaulted me in the street, and yet the police and the Crown Prosecution Service refused to prosecute, saying that it would not be in the public interest. Now, if that was me, who had stolen something from a Muslim in the street, I'm quite certain that would attract a lengthy term of imprisonment. It's not just theft, it's street robbery, and that's an extremely serious. So not prosecute Muslims who had done that to a middle-class non-Muslim going about his lawful business in the street. So all these kind of things have to be addressed. But yeah, there's a tremendous culture of fear because of this political correctness that we've had. People fear for their jobs.
It's the political correctness is an ideology, but it's the other part, linking it with violence, linking it with anger, linking it with financial loss. Like political correctness, you can say, is a stupid ideology of the victim is always right. Microaggression is a massive horror. There was some. By the way, I consider myself a feminist, meaning I'm for male-female equality. That's my kind of feminism. But there was this woman who considered herself a feminist, whom I heard say that asking a woman out for coffee in an elevator is worse than rape. I went,
well, yeah, there are a lot of silly things.
But the thing is, she's got, people are listening to her. That's quote-unquote microaggression. Yeah. Would you like a coffee? Oh, if somebody puts it on her head, I can imagine her getting offended. In the same way, it's not the political correctness. It's that it has power, it has clout, and it's being used against you. It's a form of terrorism, not violent terrorism in most cases. But if you can't go to the police and get theft and being knocked down, etc., taken seriously, what can you get taken seriously?
Well, yeah, that is the question, because you see in all sorts of news reports, certainly in the UK, you can go to prison for doing very minor things. There was a gentleman by the name of Kevin Crean a couple of years ago. He decided he was going to decorate a mosque door handle with a slice of bacon. Very thoughtful of him, you might say. But he was arrested, charged, prosecuted, convicted and imprisoned for that offence.
For a year.
Well, I think it was for a year, but anyway, partway through his sentence, he was found dead in his cell. And the authorities were very tight-lipped about what the cause of death was, which is very unusual.
I read. And he was 34.
Well, yes, quite.
34. Most 34-year-olds resting in prison.
How likely? Yeah.
He must have worked out too hard in his exercise program.
Yeah, well, I think it's much more likely that he was murdered in prison by Muslims who found out that he had decorated a mosque door handle with a slice of bacon, because Muslims are not known for sitting down and writing letters of complaint. Muslims are known for getting out and being anybody that they perceive as being disrespectful towards Islam. And, it's not just an isolated instance. It's the norm for Muslims to go directly to violence if they feel that we're not being respectful enough towards Islam. And, of course, because of that, everybody is running scared of Muslims. Instead of the law coming down on our side and saying to Muslims, this is not acceptable behaviour, and making an example of a large number of Muslims so that this behaviour stops, they encourage it. That the police run away from gangs of Muslims rather than tackling the problem head on. And because of that, Muslims feel they can do pretty much what they want, and they do.
And it just reflects very badly on nice Muslims, because when you're letting the nasty Muslims represent Muslims, and then you're not allowed to prosecute them because you might give a bad image to the nice ones, but the bad ones are the ones who are giving the bad image to the Muslims. I mean, it's just a totally crazy situation where you don't stop bad behavior, but it would be bad to prosecute them because it wouldn't look good or something. I mean, a totally crazy situation. Anyhow, I really hope you win this appeal and that we have one justice for all.
And we have to change the perception of Islam, and that's one of the other things that I try to do when I'm talking on my broadcasts, my radio broadcasts, and the articles that I write and the videos that I produce. I actually outline why Islam should not be considered as a religion at all. It's not a religion in moral terms, in philosophical terms, and it's not a religion in legal terms. And the only thing that's stopping it being thrown out as a religion is the unwillingness of the authorities to face facts, to face reality, and say, in legal terms, Islam should not be considered as a religion. Now, this is going to make things worse and worse and worse, day by day by day, until such time as Muslims feel strong enough over, and then there will be blood on the streets. So it's far better that we do something about it now, if we can, in order to save lives in the future. And that's really where we're at. We're trying to save lives, maybe not our own lives, a generation or two's time, to try and save the lives of our children and grandchildren.
I have a different view about the religion thing, and I'll just give it, and that is that it doesn't matter if it's a religion. I'm all for religious freedom, but it's not the top priority. It's absolutely not the top priority. So I don't care if Islam's a religion. For example, the Greek religion was a religion. And, a Greek god told Agamemnon to kill his daughter. Freedom of religion means he did good. His wife was upset and killed him. So I don't care about freedom of religion. I do, in fact, I think, but we just need to go, where is it in priorities? Freedom of religion does not give you the right to murder. Freedom of religion does not give you the right to threaten violence. Freedom of religion doesn't do X, Y, Z. So yes, freedom of religion is priority 72. Freedom of religion does not allow you to threaten people who leave your religion. Freedom of religion doesn't do this, that, and I mean for any religion. If you want to stop being a Buddhist, you have to be entitled to do that. So I'm not going to get into, you and I can have an argument about this some other time. My thing is simply we need to recognize, again, this is people being insane. Why doesn't everybody know that freedom of religion is one priority among many? And all priorities are not the same. You may want your 2-year-old to have the right to express him or herself, but does that mean that they can go out and run him traffic? No, because there are higher priorities, like the safety of that 2-year-old. And right now what we've done is we put freedom of religion above things that are much more important. Like your freedom of religion ends when you threaten violence, when you do violence, when you are abusive, etc. So, I don't know, do you agree or disagree?
Well, I do agree, and I think it was John Stuart Mill, a philosopher from, what he said was that your liberty stops at the end of my nose, or words to that effect. Mm-hmm. And once you start impinging on other people's personal space or affecting them in some way, then that is where the boundary of their liberty should stop. And of course what we're doing is we're allowing Islam to overstep that boundary, and that needs to be corrected. But of course Muslims are not going to take it lying down, and we are going to have to be firm with them and explain that if they cannot adjust to living in a free and democratic society, then they should leave. There's no two
in other words, the society
about
needs
it.
to be
Cannot
protected.
tolerate people who behave like.
Well, or
the society has to be protected.
You cannot force them to leave, but the thing is, if you transgress the rules of this society, which is religious freedom for other people too, which is physical safety for other people, which is not knocking people down and not stealing their political placards, etc., which is not grooming young girls into rape gangs, etc. Those things, well, you can leave if you choose, but if you stay, you go to jail. And
it needs to be a level playing field for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I see your appeal is all about, because it wasn't a level playing field. They rigged the thing against you, and your barrister was below incompetent. I don't know if one can say that, but from everything I've heard, this person was not acting in your best interest. But maybe, you know what, maybe it'll work out for the better, because if you can take this appeal, and we'll make it as public as we can, and take down that person who was mendacious, though he may not have been a grievance-mongering taqiyya artist, the guy who misspoke about taqiyya. I don't know what he is, but I know he is hiding a conflict of interest, plus he's not accurate about Islamic doctrine. So if that can be taken down, let's hope, Tim, that you can be part of turning the system around.
Well, I certainly hope so, Elsa, and I'd like to thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk about my case and about the appeal. And as you say, if there is anything that can be done out there, if any of your viewers are able to support this cause, then it would be appreciated. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Great, and there will be an update, so take care, goodbye, until next time. Bye.
Goodbye.